with job vacancies still very high, labor demand substantially exceeds the supply of available workers. FOMC participants expect supply and demand conditions in the labor market to come into better balance over time, easing upward pressures on wages and prices. The median unemployment rate projection in the SEP rises to 4.5% at the end of this year and 4.6% at the end of next year. Inflation remains well above our longer-run goal of 2%. Over the 12 months ending in January, total PCE prices rose 5.4%, excluding the volatile food and energy categories. Excluding those, core PCE prices rose 4.7%. In February, the 12-month change in the CPI came in at 6%, and the change in the core CPI was 5.5%. Inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year, but the strength of these recent readings indicates that inflation pressures continue to run high. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 3.3% for this year, 2.5% next year, and 2.1% in 2025. The process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go and is likely to be bumpy. Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The Fed's monetary policy actions are guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective. At today's meeting, the committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a quarter percentage point, bringing the target range to 4.75% to 5%. And we are continuing the process of significantly reducing our securities holdings. Since our previous FOMC meeting, economic indicators have generally come in stronger than expected, demonstrating greater momentum in economic activity and inflation. We believe, however, that events in the banking system over the past 2 weeks are likely to result in tighter credit conditions for households and businesses, which would in turn affect economic outcomes. It is too soon to determine the extent of these effects, and therefore too soon to tell how monetary policy should respond. As a result, we no longer state that we anticipate that ongoing rate increases will be appropriate to quell inflation. Instead, we now anticipate that some additional policy firming may be appropriate. We will closely monitor incoming data and carefully assess the actual and expected effects of tighter credit conditions on economic activity, the labor market, and inflation. And our policy decisions will reflect that assessment. In our SEP, each FOMC participant wrote down an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what that participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as projected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 5.1% at the end of this year, 4.3% at the end of 2024, and 3.1% at the end of 2025. These are little changed from our December projections, reflecting offsetting factors. These projections are not a committee decision or plan. If the economy does not evolve as projected, the path for policy will adjust as appropriate to foster our maximum employment and price stability goals. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below-trend growth and some softening in labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. How confident is the committee that the recent stress that we've seen and you've alluded to is contained at this point, and that deposit flight among mid-sized lenders in particular has ceased?
Thanks. So I guess our view is that the banking system is sound and it's resilient. It's got strong capital and liquidity. We took powerful actions with Treasury and the FDIC, which demonstrate that all depositors' savings are safe and that the banking system is safe. Deposit flows in the banking system have stabilized over the last week. And the last thing I'll say is that we're undertaking a thorough internal review that will identify where we can strengthen supervision and regulation.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, given all of the stress and the uncertainty that you've also alluded to in the statement, how seriously was a pause considered for this meeting?
So we considered, we did consider that in the days running up to the meeting, and you see the decision that we made, which I'll say a couple things about. First, it was supported by a very strong consensus, and I'll be happy to explain why. And really it is that the intermeeting data on inflation and the labor market came in stronger than expected, and really before the recent events, we were clearly on track to continue with ongoing rate hikes. In fact, as of a couple of weeks ago, it looked like we'd need to raise rates over the course of the year, more than we'd expected at the time of the SCP in December, the time of the December meeting. We are committed to restoring price stability, and all of the evidence says that the public has confidence that we will do so, that we'll bring inflation down to 2% over time. It is important that we sustain that confidence with our actions as well as our words. So we also assess, as I mentioned, that the events of the last 2 weeks are likely to result in some tightening of credit conditions for households and businesses, and thereby weigh on demand, on the labor market, and on inflation. Such a tightening in financial conditions would work in the same direction as rate tightening. In principle, as a matter of fact, you can think of it as being the equivalent of a rate hike, or perhaps more than that. Of course, it's not possible to make that assessment today with any precision whatsoever. So our decision was to move ahead with a 25 basis point hike, and to change our guidance, as I mentioned, from ongoing hikes to some additional hikes, maybe some policy firming may be appropriate. So going forward, as I mentioned, in assessing the need for further hikes, we'll be focused, as always, on the incoming data and the evolving outlook, and in particular on our assessment of the actual and expected effects of credit tightening.
Mr. Chairman, can you explain the difference between ongoing rate increases and firming? Does firming imply a rate increase per se, or could policy firm without you increasing rates?
No, I think it's meant to refer to our policy rate. Really, I would focus on the words may and some, as opposed to ongoing. So we clearly were, what we were doing there was taking on board trying to reflect the uncertainty about what will happen. I mean, it's possible that this will turn out to have very modest effects. These events will turn out to be very, very modest effects on the economy, in which case, and inflation will continue to be strong, in which case, the path will
le pregunta que cómo va a ser más difícil, cómo es posible que suban los intereses y que no afecte el sistema financiero. Es decir, bueno, a ver, lo más rescatable aquí es que, como te lo anunciaba en la mañana, ya ha subido el FED la tasa de interés el 0.25%, que esperaban que subiera más. Ahorita ya están en la rueda de prensa, están dando los resultados de alguna manera, dando a conocer cómo está la situación, algunas preguntas, algunos intercambios, pero básicamente ya está subiendo y los principales diarios ya están moviéndolo. Estados Unidos eleva el 0.25% los tipos de interés y los coloca entre el 4.75 y 5%. Como te lo decía, se esperaba que posiblemente subiera más. Él lo que acaba de decir es que todavía no se espera. Dice que viene una depresión fuerte y de alguna manera pues esto es lo que está pasando hoy en el mundo. ¿Qué tanto nos afecta? Pues amigos, nos afecta profundamente todo el tema americano.
So, we've just come from an FOMC meeting, and, the people who write the minutes will be very carefully counting, but I'll tell you what I heard. What I heard was significant number of people saying that they anticipated there would be some tightening of credit conditions, and that would really have the same effects as our policies do, and that therefore they were including that in their assessment, and that if that turned out not to be the case, that in principle you'd need more rate hikes. So some people did reflect that in their SEP forecasts. I think there may also just have been, remember, this is 12 days ago. We're trying to assess something that just is so recent, and it's people, it's very difficult. There's so much uncertainty. So December was a good place to start, and we wound up with very similar outcomes for December. And in a way, the data in the first part, the first 5 weeks of the intermeeting period, pointed to stronger inflation and stronger labor market. So that pointed to higher rates, and then this latter part, kind of the possibility of credit conditions tightening, really offset that effectively.
To follow up, have you considered at all whether your primary tool, the funds rate, is going to be enough to sustain the kind of tighter financial conditions that you believe will be necessary without doing significant damage to the banking sector? Have you, for example, considered changing reserve requirements, selling assets out of the system, open market account, as a way to better achieve tighter financial conditions that don't accelerate deposit erosion, for example, from banks?
We know that we have other tools in effect, but no, we think our monetary policy tool works, and we think, many banks, our rate hikes.
Bien, pues bueno, sigue la conferencia de prensa, siguen comentándole que cómo va a afectar esta reducción de créditos a Estados Unidos. Y bueno, como te lo decía, paisano, de alguna manera, pues viene el incremento, vienen los incrementos muy fuertes a lo que viene siendo las tasas de interés, 0.25%, a menos de que tengas una gran cantidad de dinero en Estados Unidos, pero como sabemos que todos nos vivimos en base a pura deuda, y pues bueno, así que esto es lo que está pasando. Te lo había comentado en la mañanera que esto era muy probable lo que pasara allá en Estados Unidos. Este es el informe que estamos pasando en vivo, lo que he podido de alguna manera alcanzar a traducir y a escuchar. Esto es lo que está viviéndose hoy en Estados Unidos. Pues bueno, simplemente las previsiones son cumplidas. Les había dicho que iba a aumentar. Incluso lo que dijo él es que podía haber aumentado más, pero pues puede todavía hacerlo de aquí a la siguiente junta del FED. Por eso la importancia de estas juntas, para que tú puedas estar escuchando qué es lo que está fijando la postura de Jerome Powell. Y esto es lo que hoy se sube las tasas de interés. Así que si tú vas a sacar algún crédito, pues hay que tener pues mucho cuidado. Sobre todo lo más importante o lo más destacable es que el dinero de los inversores que tú tienes en el banco está seguro, que fue lo que primero preguntaron. Todo esto que está haciendo es para estabilizar la economía. Las gráficas que mostró, pues se prevé que no en el corto plazo se pueda estar estabilizando esto. Estamos viviendo una situación inédita, una situación muy complicada para Estados Unidos. No igual que el 2008, todavía no estamos igual, pero sí viene esta próxima crisis económica se aproxima. Allá no le llaman crisis, allá le llaman recesión, depresión, pero pues bueno, simplemente en términos llanos se llama crisis económica. Va a haber más desempleo, es lo que estaba tratando de cuidar, de que no subiera más la tasa de intereses para no afectar también el desempleo, pero dice que también pues va a haber personas que se van a ver afectadas, así que obviamente va a haber más desempleo, te van a contratar ya en términos llanos, menos horas de trabajo, vas a tener menos dinero, todo sigue muy caro, te va a costar mucho más trabajo que califiques para créditos de casas, de carros, de todo. Pues bueno, esto es lo que está pasando hoy en el mundo. El FED hoy anuncia un 0.25 los tipos de interés y los coloca entre 4.75 y 5%, así que pues bueno, ahí calcúlale cuánto ocupas para tener tu casa. Así que saludos a todos, amigos, esta es la información que está ocurriendo completamente en vivo en el mundo. Saludos, vámonos, compártele y coméntale cómo andas con tus deudas. ¿Quieres que profundicemos más en estos temas? Pues bueno, déjame en los comentarios. déjame en los comentarios, o si quieres que hagamos algo en particular con algún caso tuyo, pues bueno, lo platicamos y vemos qué podemos hacer. Mientras tanto, pues bueno, saludos a todos. ¡Vámonos! Hasta la próxima. Tu amigo y servidor Carlos Flores, transmitiendo completamente en vivo desde el Centro de Operaciones Carlos Flores en Jiquilpan, Michoacán. Así que compártele, y pues bueno, ahora sí que hasta la próxima.